Hello and welcome to this video. Today I'm going to customize this posable bear plastic figure. Now I'm going to completely turn it into a different creature, so I need to do some thought surgery before I actually can begin sculpting. But first I needed to decide which kind of pose I wanted, and I decided to just go with standing. Well, now let's actually sew off these ears, and this was fairly simple. The plastic is so soft that it didn't take any time at all to sew through it. The only thing it left was some gaps there, and that is just because this is a hollow cast. And next up it was sculpting time. I'm just using some basic Sculpey medium here, and I'm sculpting all the details that I can bake separately and don't have to put onto the bear, because this plastic is very soft and I don't trust that it will hold up any time in the oven at the temperatures that the clay needs to bake. So I'm starting off by making antlers. And in this case it's literally just cutting two logs with different lengths, angling one of them and then blending them together, and I'm making one for each side. I'm also rounding over the tops here just to give them a little bit better of a shape, and then it's just blending time, and then all I need to do later is add some texture with my stylus. And the tool I'm always using for this clay to blend is just a silicone shaper that is medium softness. I think it's one of the easiest tools to use for this kind of clay, and it makes them blend really well, and you can use them for adding details like these lines that I'm adding. Also, excuse me, but this camera likes to focus on the bright light of the reflection of this baking tray thing, so if it's getting darker sometimes and out of focus, that's why. Now, the antlers aren't the only thing that I can sculpt beforehand and then attach later, and one of these is the tail. Sadly, my camera cut out midway through recording, so I didn't record the base step, which is literally just making a teardrop shape, bending it a little bit to get the right shape, and then adding some lines again for texture. And then I'm adding some tiny wormy dealies and blending them in just to give it a bit more variation and make it look like kind of tufts of fur, and just give the tail more dimension before adding just some more lines to blend them in with the texture I previously made for the fur. And once that's done, I'm just putting it onto the baking tray, and I'm flattening it to the shape that will hopefully fit well onto the back of the bear. And then it's on to making the last sculptable thing with this type of clay, and that is the ears. Now the ears are fairly simple. All I need to do is basically make two equal-sized teardrop shapes, but flattened this time. And I tried to use a tool for it, but in the end I found it's actually easier to start off with a flattened shape from the table. These are fairly thick, so I could lift them off easily. I guess if you make smaller sculptures and you want to make the ears that way, actually putting them on a tool is probably easier, because you can remove them easier, but for this I could just basically use my table as a base and just sculpt them on there and then get the shape right. And it was actually one of the more simpler sculpts that I did ears wise. It was just this teardrop shape that I then formed into these pokey-esque ears before trimming off the bottom a little bit just to check that they will fit onto the sculpture. And then it was off to baking. Now, as I mentioned, this sculpture has very soft plastic, so I'm not gonna put it anywhere near an oven actually, because I think it would melt. And the reason I know that it's very soft is that it didn't take too long for my heat gun when I actually was reforming it a little bit, because initially when I got it, the leg was bent inward and it couldn't stand on its own, and I used a very low heat gun setting just to warm it up a little and then put it back. So instead for attaching, I'm using epoxy sculpt, and I struggled in the beginning. I wanted to fill in the holes first, and that really didn't work. The clay fell through, so I decided to just go with it and just attach the things in hopes that the pre-baked clay would actually, you know, cover up the holes a bit and give like a sturdier base, which it did. So for those who don't know, epoxy sculpt is a 2-part mixable clay that hardens in like 24 hours, and you can blend it and sculpt with it, and it's basically hardening due to mixing the 2 parts together. And it's very sticky, so it actually blends well and sticks well to most objects, including glass and plastic. The only thing that is it has a limited working time, so mixing smaller batches and then working with them in like sections actually works well. And the stickiest it is in the beginning, and that's also when it is the softest, and sometimes in that stage it may not want to hold its shape. Either way, after blending in the ears and the antlers, I just went in with some water and smoothed this clay out. Like smoothing out any kind of polymer clay, you can actually use rubbing alcohol. In this case, with epoxy sculpt, actually blending it and smoothing it out works with water. And then it was time to define the eyes and the face shape, and of course add the tail and all that. So for the eyes, I used the bean shape, pressed it in, smoothed it out again, and that was it. As for the face shape, I'm actually just blending in a little like muzzle kind of thing, and then I'm going to use my sculpting tools to define this. Epoxy sculpt does actually hold a fair bit of detail, but only after you let it sit for a while. If you immediately try to add detail when the clay is too soft, it will like lose it. But if you wait, like in my experience, like 15 to 20 minutes when it's like getting a bit stiffer, I guess it depends also on your room temperature and all that, it usually is very easily taking in details. So that is what I'm doing here, and why I didn't add the details yet to the antler parts, because they were still a little bit more soft. With that, I basically completely changed the face shape and the shape of this figure, and as you can see, we are making a fawn-esque creature, kind of like a deer-like, something in that direction. So I'm just going around after I feel the clay is hardened enough, and I'm also going to texture the things that hold the horns. And then it's actually time to attach the tail. And this part was a bit harder, like unsurprisingly, because the shape of the tail is a bit more bulky and it's hard to get in between. It actually took me quite a while to blend this in, and the tail kept moving a little bit, because the clay at this point was a little bit harder and didn't stick as much, and it like took quite a bit of effort to like blend it in with my stylus and my fingers without moving the tail and having some gaps. But once I got it and I got the texture in, the tail stuck pretty well. It was just basically a mixture of the clay already setting a little bit and the tail having like a knot shape. But afterwards it was totally fine and secure, and after the clay hardened I didn't have any problems with like having to worry about the tail failing. And then it was actually time to add the last of the details, which is the hooves and some tiny wefts of hair on the chest. So since this is a deer-like creature, it needs split hooves. So I'm just adding some tiny balls of like clay, smushing them down onto the hands and feet. I didn't get the hands quite even, or as even as I wanted to, but I think it still worked out pretty well. And this is just basically the balls being smushed on there and then cut away the V shape to form the hooves. It's not really gonna stand on them on the hand, so I'm not too worried about them being flat. It's more of getting the shape right. But on the feet, I'm then just basically going to stand them onto something where they can be removed from. And that will be, in this case, just the same baking tray I used for the clay baking before. Note that you shouldn't set it down on any surface that you don't know if the clay will actually get off of. So I would suggest maybe a baking mat, a baking sheet, or anything, like maybe even a silicone mat, that you know that you can't peel this clay off, because if it sticks, and it's really hard to get off. And if you have like a table or something that has vinyl, it may actually ruin that and rip off the vinyl when you try to get your figure off, or it will actually, if you're lucky, just rip off the plastic of the figure and then you will have to glue it. But I honestly wouldn't risk it. I would rather go with like a non-stick sheet of some sort, or yeah, as I said, baking paper or something. I basically mixed up the perfect amount of clay in the end. I didn't know how much clay I would have left from the feet and all that to make the chest with, but basically what I decided was the chest looks really empty, so I'm just adding like 3 teardrop shapes on there, kind of blending them in a little bit, and then I'm adding some of the fur texture, just like I did with the tail, and that is hopefully going to give it a little more detail there and not make it look this empty. Overall, this sculpture is very, very simple, and I may in the future if I want to add some accessories or something, but those aren't be sculpted on. Those are likely like separately made, so I can maybe take them off or something. But for now, like, the base sculpture of this is done, which means I can, after 24 hours of waiting time for the clay turn, finally actually paint it. And of course, since this is like plastic, I need a base coat, so it's getting a layer of gesso, which also helps to blend in the grey parts of the epoxy and the Sculpey, just to like make it easier to paint. And then I'm going in with this nice warm light brown over all the parts besides the antlers, and this is basically going to give us a base coat. Note that these are just normal acrylic paint, so it took me a couple coats to like get it opaque. And then I'm taking this larger, more chocolatey brown, and I'm just using my brush to blend it into the arms and legs. And with doing that, I basically am applying a thin fresh coat of the base paint I used, and then just blending it with the fresh paint of the brown. And I made sure to use a brush that I knew would give a bit more streaks, just to give it a bit more fur texture. And I'm doing the same with its chin. As for the like wefts of chest hair and all that, and the inner ears, and actually also the tail, I'm going to go in with this darker brown. I mixed it up a little bit to make it a little bit lighter for the ears and stuff, and I'm going to blend it in with a fresh darker coat. But for the basically antler like holder parts, I'm just blending like a bit of a like gradient just for the edges to make them like more visible and more obvious and all that. And then it's actually time to paint these antlers. And that is just made by using some white paint, and this is actually like a off-white bone color. In this case, I'm using some model paints, and the reason I'm using them is just because they're a bit more opaque, and I knew they would only need one layer to cover up all this brown. Although with like stronger base coat, this still might take some more, but these are the Vallejo brand, and this like bone white actually fit really well for these antlers. I did have to touch up some of the areas just with some water, and then also some on the ears with some of the base paint, but that is just because there's some little nooks and crannies in between the ears, and it was really hard to hit them. And then, as I said, it was time to paint the tail a bit darker, and then the next part is actually painting the eyes. And for that, I'm just using some black, and I'm also adding this black to the nose and the hooves. And this black is just basically a placeholder. The eyes are getting a bit more detail later, I just need this to dry. But I'm also making sure when I paint the hooves that I don't actually hit any of the other parts that I spend like time to blend in, because in this point in time, when you have a blend like this and you go over it with a different color, it's really hard to fix it. So if you make like any mistakes, especially with a darker color like this, it will take a couple layers of fixing. And as you noticed, I did get a little bit of black while painting the eyes onto the face, but that just took 2 coats of the brown and then it was fixed. So nothing to worry about, it just took the base color, because luckily the face didn't have any other blended colors in that area. And with that, we're actually almost done painting. The only thing that's really missing is the eyes from details, and then I'm going to give it a little wash. So for the eyes, I decided to also go with a warm yellow-orange tone. And that is because I thought it would match the colors that we already have pretty well, since they're all warm. So I just went in with like 2 swoops of yellow and then adding some orange details and blending them in just a tiny bit. And then I'm going in with a large ball stylus just to give it the irises back. I wanted to go with a very like simple eye look that showed like the eye colors and all that. But I also wanted to make it look a bit more cutesy, so it's getting a bit larger iris and all that. And then some eye shines, because eye shines are the magic that make eye looks not looking dead, if you know what I mean. And instead gives them more liveliness and all that, because as you well know, eyes are supposed to be watery, so they are reflective. And eye shines give that illusion. So I'm just using my ball stylus and adding some white paint. Again, the same paint actually I used for the antlers, the off-white. And I decided to go with this off-white just because I thought it actually would match the character better. Although in case of this, because of the black, it looks actually way more white. But that is okay for the eye shines. And then I'm using just some gloss varnish, and this is to protect all the areas I don't want the wash to affect. And then I'm mixing a very potent black and brown acrylic wash, so just acrylic paint and water, and then applying it liberally all over, and I'm actually letting it dry a little bit. The only thing that's not getting this wash are the antlers. They're getting a different color. Like in the end, I'm just basically like covering them with like a, I guess, like off brown color. And for this black, after I let it sit, I basically went into like fur direction, you could say, with a paper towel, and I'm wiping it off. And this leaves like a bit more texture, like kind of like brush turquoise, but it also fills all of the recesses in like the tail details and all that, and it just makes it look way more textured and way less clean. And since this is like a woodland creature, it just makes it look a bit better. And then I'm adding, as I said, this ivory brown to the horns and doing the same technique of just dabbing it off, and with that the figure is done. I'm super happy with how it turned out. I think it looks absolutely adorable. It like looks super cute, and it's like a super nice base for like any kind of decoration, maybe clothes making or something. But I have to decide it at a later date if I even want to, or if I want to leave it plain. But it certainly doesn't look like the original bear figure anymore at all, which I'm actually pretty happy about, because that was what I intended. So as you could see, it is very simple to like customize these kind of like posable figures and make them your own creatures, which is really neat if you don't want a bear or whatever's out there, but any kind of like animal or figure. Just with some clay and all that, you can make a lot of changes to these, and I think it's a lot of fun to like design your own characters. But I do also have a second one of these figures, so let me know in the comments down below. First of all, which accessories would you like to see on this figure? Maybe I'm gonna make like a video where I sewed some clothes or something, give it some accessories, sculpt something more. And also, what should I do with the second figure? What kind of character do you want to see? And if you would design a character yourself, which character would you make? Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. Have a great day, see you next time, bye bye!